Mr. Acting Deputy President. The Australian submarine enterprise is approaching a significant decision milestone. Where will the full-cycle dockings for the Collins Class submarines be done in the future? In Adelaide, where it is currently done, or in Perth? The submarine enterprise is, according to its stakeholders, delivering and meeting their expectations. It has gone from what was probably best described as a collection of disparate entities working to their own interests to what is referred to as an effective enterprise working together towards common goals, achieving world's best practice and very high submarine availability. This is fantastic. It proves that Australia is capable of taking on the challenge of being a parent navy for a submarine class, something we know takes commitment, planning and leadership. So it would come as no surprise, or should come as no surprise, that I was blown away when I see people framing up an argument to deconstruct a system that's working, just to transfer it to another location for shallow reasons at huge cost to the taxpayer and at great risk to submarine availability. I refer the Chamber to a recent article, opinion piece on the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's strategist blog by retired Rear Admiral Rowan Moffat. After a long period of silence, he has popped his head up and waded into a political debate. I don't understand why. He makes a very limited number of valid points. For example, in relation to transitioning ASC from a construction yard, which built the Collins Class submarines, to a maintenance provider, he states, "It took over a decade and the Coles review before an acceptable outcome was reliably achieved." Now, around about the turn of this decade, we had shocking submarine availability. At one stage, Cameron Stewart reported in The Australian that none of our 6 submarines could go to sea. Not one. Not a single submarine could go to sea. The Australian understands the entire fleet of 6 Collins-class submarines cannot be put to sea despite Navy claims that 2 of them remain officially operational. The situation is so dire that the Navy is believed to have deferred major scheduled maintenance work on its most seaworthy submarine, HMAS Waller, in the hope that at least 1 submarine will be available in the coming weeks. That's where we were at back in 2011. Bad pressure, pressure on the submarine by the then Shadow Defence Minister Johnston gave rise to a significant review of the state of our submarine force. This was conducted by John Coles over a couple of years. The Coles review, which became the basis for fixing our submarine enterprise, found that there were 5 root causes: unclear requirements, lack of performance-based ethos, unclear lines of responsibility, poor planning and a lack of a single set of accurate information to inform decision-making. The report was handed down in November 2012, and Navy and industry, including ASC, has done a great job in fixing the problem. As stated earlier, we now have a world-class submarine enterprise giving us unprecedented submarine availability. Australia and the Navy now has a sustainment model where the submarines undergo self-maintenance periods, intermediate and mid-cycle dockings in Western Australia, and full-cycle dockings, the most complex, deeper maintenance activities, which take 24 months, are being done in Adelaide, where the deeper knowledge base is. And it works. We've spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, getting things to the point where they are now. And we now have retired people like Mr Moffat suggesting we pick up full-cycle docking work that has been carried out in Australia, spend more than $1 billion to carry it across the Nullarbor, knowing full well that a significant—
Thank you, Senator Patrick. Your time has expired. Okay. You have another 5 minutes, Senator Patrick.
We've spent hundreds of millions, if not billions, getting to the point where we are now. And we now have people like retired Mr Moffat suggesting we pick up the full-cycle docking work that has been carried out in Australia, in Adelaide, and spend more than $1 billion to carry it across the Nullarbor, knowing full well that a significant majority of the 700 workers, each with more than 11 years of average experience, will not shift with that work. Indeed, this point is conceded by Mr Moffat in his blog when he says the existing specialists are in SA and probably won't want to move westward, given the exciting new frigate and submarine work on offer in Adelaide. This is a tacit acknowledgement that the vast majority of the roughly 700 staff working on Collins won't move west, and the corporate knowledge of ASC will be gutted. If you were going to do the shift, you would have done it years ago. You would have done it when the system was broken. You don't spend the money fixing it to then break it when you shift it again. That's crazy. It's nonsense on stilts. It makes no sense. I just want to make it clear, I'm highly respectful of the men and women who serve in our Defence Forces, particularly those that serve in the operational units of the ADF. But I will be, and I'm entitled to be critical of those senior officers that sit in their comfy chairs at Russell offices or Campbell Park or Brindabilla Park and think of ways to spend billions of dollars just moving deck chairs. Unlike individuals or businesses that have to earn money and then think very carefully about how they spend or invest it, Defence just gets the money handed to them. And the money the Defence Forces waste is sometimes incomprehensible to people. $1 billion wasted on a Sea Sprite helicopter that never saw service. And the LCM 2000 project that resulted in a watercraft, that being a landing craft, too big for the ship it was intended. And when they went to replace it, the watercraft for the LHDs is now not buoyant enough to carry the Abrams tank. As Joe, the cameraman from Channel 9, said, they can't bowl and they can't bat. Mr Moffat talks about doubling the number of submariners and saying that we now have less than 1,000 submariners in the Navy, and saying, and I quote, "The fact that the RAN must expand this workforce substantially for the new submarines is barely mentioned in the debate we're having on full-cycle dockings." But this is not a debate about submarine power. We're discussing submarine engineering and submarine industrial capability. Having read his opinion piece, I'm not sure how it advances the debate or lines up the right questions for debate. My impression was that it was a mash-up of a variety of points stitched together in such a way as I can only assume the point of it was to simply confuse people. And if that was the aim, he hit the bullseye. It does not make sense to shift submarine sustainment to WA. We have a perfectly working situation now. It will cost more than $1 billion to do so. It will result in a massive loss of corporate knowledge. It will result in a loss of submarine availability. And all the arguments about wanting to have this capability next to where the submarines operate from, and I get the reason why we have our intermediate level dockings done there and our mid-cycle dockings, but for a 24-month docking, we take the submarine across to Adelaide, the crew then post to another submarine, and in the end we're going to have submarines both on the west coast and on the east coast, both in Perth and probably Sydney, or perhaps somewhere near Jervis Bay or Newcastle or Wollongong. That's on record in an FOI that I've received. It makes no sense. If you're going to spend $1 billion of hard-earned taxpayers' dollars, you spend it on growing something, on building something new, not shifting something because it becomes convenient as an idea in the minds of some senior defence officials. This is a silly idea, shifting full-cycle dockings to WA, and it must not go ahead. It does not make sense. It's not in the national interest. Thank you.